thank you to everyone who is joining us online. We are going to start the presentation now. We are very lucky to have Lisa Peterson with us today to go over social media best practices. Unfortunately, the owl isn't working, so I am not going to be able to broadcast the people in the room, but everybody is looking at the same slides. So please feel free to speak up if you have any questions. We'll be able to hear you, or to post your questions in the chat box, and I will be monitoring the chat box. Thank you, and I'm turning it over to Lisa.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here today, and it's a pleasure to join you in the new building here in Berkeley Way West for the School of Public Health. As Julie mentioned, I'm currently working over at UC Berkeley SafeTech, the Safe Transportation Research and Education Center. We are affiliated with the School of Public Health as well as the Institute for Transportation Studies and affiliations with the Department of City and Regional Planning. And prior to working at SafeTrek, I was here at the School of Public Health in the Center for Public Health Practice and Leadership. And I bring that up because I think when we talk about social media, it is a social practice. It's also something that I think is not necessarily for some of our centers and our units, something that we have dedicated resources for. So it might be communications and or social media is another one of the multitude of hacks. Is there any feedback? I'll look on the chat here to make sure.
I'll keep an eye on the chat.
Okay, great. And so it being social, I want to recognize both for those folks that are online as well as those are here in the room with us, that since this is a peer-to-peer session, that since it could be a little bit overwhelming to take these tasks on, think about connecting with those that are in our community to share best practices, to be inspired from one another, and to learn about what works and what can be challenging and how to overcome that. And we have several folks here in the room. Want to get a show of hands if you're already using social media? Yes? So we have one person shaking no, 3 yeses. Can I hear what type of social media you're using right now? LinkedIn?
Facebook and Twitter.
Facebook, Twitter. Any others?
Just LinkedIn and Facebook.
Great. Instagram? Okay, excellent.
What about people online? Feel free to speak up or put it in the chat box.
Yes. Any other tools that we haven't heard beyond LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram? And Julie will help monitor that, and we'll get a sense of what other types of channels are being used. And I think the best place to start, and Julie, can you help me here in terms of how to advance the slides? No, let's look down here. There we go. I think one of the best places to start is to think about this task in terms of probably how you already do much of your work, which is with intentionality. How might you think about taking this on with guiding lights of being intentional? If you're going to take the task, how are you going to do what you're going to do? And that means selecting the right type of tools that are in relationship to who you're trying to reach, for what purposes, what you hope to happen, what types of results you hope to have as a impact of what you're doing. How are you measuring what you're doing to determine what's working, what's not working, what you might be able to drop, what you still need to do? And lastly, how can you be strategic in terms of tapping into what have been acknowledged and recognized as some of the best practices to take on, which is so that you don't have instance through the Wisdom Cafe, you have the ability to sorry, I was just seeing some of the messages come up on the slide there. One of the tools that you have is lynda.com, which I think is LinkedIn Teaching now. That resource, for instance, has a multitude of tutorials on how to use some of these tools, how to implement the best practices, marketing best practices, content marketing best practices. And what I'll do at the end of our conversation today is send out an email with some of the links to some of the tools that I reference. But I think that formerly known lynda.com is a great resource. But that aside, I also want to encourage you to be inspired and be open to being unique and knowing what you need to do for your unit and practicing and experimenting and having fun. And I know that sounds a little bit hard to do when you have so many tasks, but you can have some great results and have some really golden moments by tapping into your own unique voice, tone, and personality in using these tools. So don't be afraid to experiment. So, but the best place to start, as I mentioned, when you're thinking about, well, where do I begin, because it can feel kind of overwhelming, is to be intentional and to have a vision. So that really gets back to what we talked about of identifying what's the purpose for using these tools as related to your own agency or organization. And that's related to your mission. For instance, at SafeTrek, our mission is the reduction of transportation-related injuries and fatalities. And we achieve that through a three-pronged approach where it's a combination of conducting research, doing education, as well as community service. So we want to be able to use tools that help us to communicate how we are having an impact in our mission through those different main primary objectives. So you, I think, would be helped by identifying, answering those questions. How are these tools going to help you achieve your own mission? And who are you going to be communicating with? How are you going to connect with them? Where are they at? And what type of impact do you want to have? And another good place to start is to tap into that why. So why are you doing this in the first place? There are so many both established tools, there's new players on the field that come out, and it can be a little bit overwhelming in thinking about, well, which ones should I use? You know, we have folks in the room that shared that they're using maybe one or two. At SafeTrek, for instance, we're using Twitter primarily. We have a LinkedIn account, and we have a YouTube account, which we are currently creating a lot more content for. But I think the best place to start is think about why. Do you want to raise awareness about your organization, what you're doing? Do you want to tap into those within the community or further afield in your sector that are engaged in trying to make a difference in the perhaps health issue or sector that you're working in, and you want to develop some relationships with them? Do you want to educate and inform? Are you aiming to change behavior, to influence policy? And lastly, are you thinking about inspiring action? Do you want folks to come along and join you in making something happen, whether that's a campaign you're engaged in, it's advocacy efforts, or it could be taking action on coming to an event, coming to a conference, coming to a training. So it's good to identify what some of those things are in terms of your why for why you're using social media. And there's the other questions, you know, the who, what, when, where, that we also want to think about. It's key to identify who is your audience. What do they care about? What are their needs? Think about social media and the communications that you're making there as a way in which to connect with them, to deliver valuable information, insights, actionable items in terms of meeting their needs. What types of problems are they trying to solve? And I think it's helpful to know who and what their needs are. You next need to set some goals and objectives so that you're not just pell-mell kind of busy doing a lot of things disconnected from that intention and purpose, as we mentioned. You want to identify what the actions you're going to take in order to achieve the objectives that you set out. And I do want to mention, the next step is putting a plan into place. And social media, let's think about that word social. I want you to think about it being a two-way street, not a one-way street, and that you're not just pushing content out to be consumed, but thinking about how you can connect with folks, how you can create a relationship, how you might engage with them, which is different than just broadcasting information. And so it's being intentional and thinking how you might engage with folks and create that relationship. So once you have your vision, goals, and objectives in place, in order to engage, I think it's a good idea to do something called social media monitoring, which is pushing pause before you put everything out there and learning to listen. And learning to listen is really taking a moment to be reflective, to look and watch and listen and see what type of quality content is inspiring. What motivates to get back to what you were identifying as your why, to raise awareness, to have people take action, to sign up for something, to show up, to come along with you. So that really is content that feels to your audience authentic. It relates to them. It's timely. It feels human, coming from real people. And so I think one of the best places to try and identify those qualities is the active listening. And I'll share a link to a great resource from the Green Lining Institute, which is a community-based organization that probably many of you are familiar with, local partners here from the School of Public Health. They have a social media toolkit called The Art of Listening, which has a lot of steps and strategies and ways to take this active listening on, and I'll be sure to share that with you all afterwards. And when you're listening or watching, I encourage you to look not only inside your field, but outside your field for inspiration. Now, it might be that you work in public health and you are perhaps focused on maternal child health. Why don't you take a look and see who maybe an organization working on environmental justice, how are they reaching folks? What type of content are they using? In addition to looking within your own field. Now, over at SafeTrek, we focus primarily on transportation safety. One of the organizations that I like to look to that's a little different in terms of some of the work they do is the National Association of City Transportation Officials, or NACTO. And I really like the tone, the brand, the feeling that's very consistent across mediums, whether that's on their website, on their social media channels, as well as the content that they deliver across those channels. I find it to be very inspiring. They get a lot of engagement with folks. Their content is frequently shared with others, both within their field and a little bit further afield. And so I find them to be very compelling. Another that's closer afield to us is a research institute up at Portland State University called TREC. And I really like how they share what they're doing in terms of that research, education, and the outreach that they're doing. I like seeing how they share what the faculty and the students are doing within their organization, the tech transfer activities they're engaged in, and they do trainings, workshops, courses, conferences. So it's a nice way to see how another actor in the field, very similar to our own, is using social media to share their own work and raise awareness about it. So I'll just stop there for a minute and just ask you what inspires you, whether you're on for your own organization or personally? Is there a particular organization, unit on campus, or others that might inspire you? And for those that are online, feel free to share in the chat box. No right or wrong answer. Any ideas come to mind?
I went to the School of Arts and Letters sometimes. I think that they're really good at creating like beautiful content.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So this is Diana, and she looks at the School of Arts and
I believe it's the School of Arts and Letters.
and mentions that she finds that their content is really beautiful.
Yeah.
When you use the word beautiful, what does that mean to you?
It's visually appealing. And I mean, it's been a while since I've worked on there, but I just remember going on there and thinking, oh wow, like, you know, on their main page, not their social media per se, I'm not following social media, but
Mhm.
they should. On the website they have it looks like I think they use it in Berkeley, and there's always these little box formats, and
Mhm.
they seem to have like graphically designed for events, even just what appears on their main site as sort of like a teaser to get you to click through.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to have graphically designed those in a way that like each of them is a little different and graphically appealing and still using different colors.
Great.
Yeah.
And thank you, Diana. Diana brings up a great resource also on campus, which is the branding website here on Berkeley, which has a variety of toolkits and assets that you can download and use as a guidance for your own work, whether that's for graphics, color, typography, fonts, and templates to use. So I'll share that link with you as well in case you're not already using it. But thank you, Diana. Anybody else?
I mean, I don't use social media professionally at all. The reason that I like Facebook is, I mean, I like that it's just a cocktail party that you can jump into and jump out of at any time. You know, you post your thoughts, and there's, you know, someone you haven't seen in 20 years has, you know, a witty remark to share. So I don't have necessarily, well, I'm not involved in the programmatic reasons to be using social media, even though my whole world is online as an instructional designer. But that to me is why I would follow an organization online, is not just to be able to sort of passively see updates, but also to be able to kind of jump in and make a comment here and there,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe interact with that, you know, with that organization. I guess Twitter is more and more used for that. And in fact, Twitter is the one that sort of breaks down the walls between public figures and, you know, us
Mhm.
normal folk, because you can tweet a public figure and sometimes they'll actually see it and respond to it. I don't know. I feel like Twitter is way too time consuming. Whereas Facebook just has a nice, easy to follow news feed.
Okay, so Facebook is a great, easy, low burden in terms of time investment to kind of
Yes.
walk into the party,
Yes.
walk over to the corners where conversations that you're interested in are happening, share in the conversation. Twitter feels like it could be valuable, but a little bit more labor intensive in terms of involvement.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's my experience.
great. Anybody else?
I think I tend to find most interesting the smaller, like nonprofits, where there's often that call to action, or you know, it's like more sort of heartfelt or heart-based postings, you know,
Mhm.
where it's like, oh, here's what we're doing, and this is why it matters. This is why it's important. And I think sometimes in academia it's a bit challenging because we do have research that we're trying to present, which can be, you know, a little bit dry to present to the general public, and making connections as to why that's important. Because there's a lot of like fine lines that you have to walk.
Right.
So,
Yeah, Diane, you bring up a good couple points there in terms of how you might tell the story or the why of what you're doing underneath the kind of more dense research that's often a little bit more difficult to connect with, and how you might make that a connection, which is often quite emotional. You mentioned the heart space, which is really, I want to do something about this. I want to come along with you. How do you do that? And I think that for some of these mediums, increasingly being able to tell that story through a visual or multimedia lens can be helpful. I know at SafeTrek we've had the ability to engage with one of our graduate student researchers to create videos which help to tell the story of the research that we're doing. So we have a number of brief 3 to 5 minute videos that are posted that are talking about the implications of some of the research that we're doing, whether that's around looking at taking a safe systems approach to road safety and seeing how other industries like healthcare and the construction industry, for instance, are using different ways that are related to a systemic approach to ensuring safety for the users. And it's a nice way to engage, as I said, with sound, images, the way they're put together to get to what Diana surfaces, which is the why and the story behind it. And I will mention that while video can seem really daunting, there are resources available even within your own departments. If you are able to engage with a student to come on board or somebody working in your department that may already have some of these skills, you can now make brief videos on your phones. There's tutorials for that. I'll share some of those. We have great tools that are available in order to make these short videos, whether that's on the phone itself. They're through the Adobe Creative Suite, which we have the ability to access for free here on campus, has Adobe Premiere and some other resources like Adobe Spark, I think, to create assets. So it's a little bit daunting, but increasingly we're seeing that video doesn't necessarily have to be the high quality to have the impact. There are uses to be made for short, brief ones that even somebody within your own unit can make, as well as contracting with others to make, longer format. And then related to the visuals, it can be daunting to create those own visuals for your own unit, right? You might not have a camera. Do you have the time to get out there? But there are increasingly great resources available for low cost or for free to access photos, graphics, iconography to use on infographics that are free in the Creative Commons. And I'll share some of those resources with you as well. But thanks everybody for sharing some of the reasons and things that you like to look for. And what we've talked about, excuse me, the next step, you've created your vision, you have identified what tools you're going to use, you are thinking about what your objectives are, and this is kind of the nub of it, right? It's like, okay, content is important. We want to have good content, but oh my gosh, where is it going to come from? And how am I going to do this? I have so many things that I'm already doing. So content can come in many forms, as we've already talked about. It could be a publication, report, a white paper, a fact sheet, a blog or news item from your website. It can be a video you've created, photos, infographics. So there's a multiple array of the types of content that you can share across social media. And also in terms of the content you're sharing, thinking about that, it doesn't all have to come just from you. It can be curated from others. Social media, as we get back to the beginning of our conversation and thinking about social and engaging, two-way relationships, relational, has to do on coming together and delivering valuable content that we can share. Like Julie said at that cocktail party, and thinking about who do I want to talk to and why. What I could walk away with that helps me to do something meaningful in my own life, right? So it might be that you are sharing valuable content that you think is important for your audience that you not necessarily created, but it might have been created by another organization, another researcher, etc. It can also be crowdsourced, and that might be, for instance, at SafeTrek, one of our programs is the California Active Transportation Safety Information Pages website, otherwise known as CATSIP, and it's meant to be an online portal for practitioners, agencies, advocates, and community members to come and see the latest resources, information, data, and tools for how to promote active transportation safety or safe walking and biking in communities. So we launched a new feature called Safety Stories, which features stories, both those that we have developed and shared, of how communities and practitioners are promoting safe walking and biking, but we've also incorporated a Stories from You component for us to crowdsource from those in our network to share their own stories of how they're promoting safe walking and biking. So that might be a guest blog post. It could be sharing a video of a bike rodeo they did, for instance, which one of our partners, Jack Becker, who used to be at Bike Bakersfield and is now working on promoting safe walking and biking up in Tuolumne County, he shared a video and a story from an event that he did in the community there. And it's excellent that Liza Lesker is here in the room, and she's like, no, not me. But I'll share that I connected with Liza because in addition to doing her fabulous work here at the School of Public Health, she's also a co-founding coordinating member of Walk Bike Berkeley. And they've done some fantastic things here in the community to really work to see, like, how can we make this community safer for all folks, all ages and abilities to get around safely, whether that's walking, biking, rolling. And so we did a video interview with Liza and another coordinating member, Ben Gerenstein, and we published that on the website. So you see there's a variety of ways to create the content, but it also gets back to that way of creating connections, making a network of support of those that care about similar issues that you're working on. And so, yes, Liza.
The crowdsource stuff, how much editorial oversight do you have over, yeah.
I think what it is helpful to do is to have some guidelines, and we publish that on our website, in that we will, doesn't represent all views, and that it is something that we are featuring. That it's not related to something that, what am I trying to say? I'll show the page, but it's kind of having the editorial guidelines public and transparent so that folks know, like for our website, we also crowdsource events to feature on the website, that there is some decision-making and review process before it is published. Does that answer your question? Yeah? Okay. And also, in terms of coming up with your content game plan, you want to identify the most effective way to get it out to your audience. So who are they? Where are they most likely to be? And one of the helpful things, as I said, is looking to see what other folks in your sector are doing. What types of tools are they using? For instance, we see here that the university website shows that in terms of reaching their audiences, whether that's current students, faculty, prospective students, alumni, funders, etc., we see that they're using Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Medium. So they've identified that those are the right tools for them to reach their audience. So you want to think about, well, which ones do I need to use? Who am I trying to reach? One of the helpful places to go for that is to do some research of your own to make an informed decision. The Pew Research Center does these great social media research papers every year to determine the usage of by demographic and platform, how are social media platforms being used. For instance, here we can see that they're sharing the percent of US adults who say they ever or use the following online platforms or messaging apps online or on their cell phone. And you can see how high the usage of YouTube and Facebook is right now. And I know YouTube is like the second search engine after Google, which is pretty amazing. But you'll see there's also those that we've mentioned in the room: Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Pew Research also has it broken down in terms of other areas of interest, gender, sociodemographics, age, which what might be helpful for you determining where is your audience at. So again, that gets back to being strategic and thinking with your limited resources and time that you're actually trying to reach who your audience is. There's no such thing as like let's just say it would be very difficult to reach the public, right? So I think similar to your other work, thinking through about who specifically am I trying to reach. And these are a good resource, and I'll share links with that for you. And so in the next part of our conversation, I just wanted to share what some of those best practices are. At the beginning of the conversation, we said, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, you will have done your listening, looking and watching to see what others are doing, and identifying what some of those best practices are on each tool in terms of how to reach your audience and achieve the impact that you're setting out to. But I want to kind of make a caveat to that to get back to the other guiding light that I shared with you, which is about practicing and not being afraid to be experimental and finding what works for you. I think you'll have your own creativity, your unique voice and way of doing things. And I like to think of it as thinking about a garden that you are tending and to experiment and see what works for you and your own way of engaging with your community through your voice, the tone, your organization's brand, and what works. You can really only achieve that through practicing and experimentation. So the first one, I just want to preface that many of these best practices, since we're not reinventing the wheel, I'm sharing that I sourced from Hootsuite, which is a social media platform. They have lots of resources online, webinars, etc., that can help you identify what the best practices are. For Twitter here, I'm sharing some best practices that were shared in a social media best practices webinar that I conducted when I was here at the School of Public Health with Mike Lawson, who is a communications manager over at the Diabetes Hands Foundation. And so I think some of you are using Twitter. Show of hands here in the room who's using Twitter. So we have a couple. So some of these might look familiar. If you do decide that you want to be on Twitter, go ahead and claim your name. Part of that listening, similar to some of the other platforms, is seeing the conversations that are being had. So on Twitter, similar to the other platforms, folks use hashtags or a way to kind of aggregate conversations being had around a particular topic, which could be a word or a phrase. For instance, we might use hashtags like road safety, safe streets for all. And if I put that in a tweet, or even if I search on Twitter, I can see who's having conversations around that. And if somebody else is searching by that because they want to know information about it, and I'm using that hashtag, they'll see my tweets. So again, that gets back to the social and then engaging part to think how you can connect with folks. That follow the well followed is back to that listening. Whose voices are out there on Twitter around the issues that you care about, that you want to join the conversation about? Who has a large following? Looking, you can see why they might have a large following. Their voice matters, the content they're delivering is quality, it feels relevant. Follow who's doing what you're doing. Practicing is going to help you find what your voice is and how you speak. I think that all platforms that you use, it would be, I think overarching is to be kind, to be warm, to be human, to be real. I don't really think, I think Twitter has similar maybe to some of the other platforms, there can be trolling or snarkiness or negative, but I think that generally that being of value, being authentic is the right way to go. Practicing is part of that talking when nobody is listening. If you're just getting started and you don't have a lot of followers, that doesn't mean to give up. I think just keep trying to put your voice out there and practice. And part of that, being genuine and being of value is also generosity, sharing things of value. Getting back to what Diana mentioned about the heart space is identifying things that matter to you. You can do that for others. Julie said, showing up to the cocktail party, find something, conversation that's meaningful. It's just the same here. So some of the other best practices, there's a multiple ways that you can join conversations, you can share content, you can be part of conversations, you can comment, you can ask questions. But similar to the other platforms, it's a matter of getting your feet under you by practicing. Anything else that works on Twitter for the two that raised their hand in the room here you want to add?
So for Mr. Hopetown Adolescent Health, we follow all the faculty and retweet their posts and, at them. We also follow a lot of the other centers of excellence, so everyone else that's doing what we do, and we somewhat engaged in that way. And then we also have a bunch of sort of partner organizations that, like part of it has to do with our the board. It's like the board that kind of helps. I can't think of the words right now, but anyway, we follow their organizations and then other organizations that help with our online course module. So we have we like scheduled out tweets for 6 months or something. Like every 2 weeks, I tweet about one of their organizations and how they're impacting the field.
Great.
Those are some things that we've done, and then we also just generally tweet. Our focus is sort of gearing more towards publications from faculty, alumni, and sometimes students. So we'll tweet about those things and any other news posts that come up about our Center of Excellence. We don't really do so many just general field tweets. I think Marissa is doing some of that, and then events that we have, we also do.
Great. Thanks, Diana. And you also mentioned that you schedule out, so are you using a tool to do that? What's that?
Twuffer.
Twuffer.
It's the silliest name in the world. Yes, Twuffer. It's like
That's a mouthful.
I know, it's so funny. But it's like, it's an online website where you can schedule out tweets.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And what we'll do is we'll share some links to some tools that you can use, which gets at what Julie mentioned about Twitter feeling like a kind of time sink, like a lot of effort, which is true. I mean, you have to be consistent. And I think using tools like Diana's mentioned and taking a little bit of front-loading time to schedule out can help alleviate some of the burden of having to think that through and make time every day to tweet. And there's other things that you can do across tools of coming up with an editorial calendar and making a calendar so you can be a little organized to help alleviate some of the burden. And there's tools and templates to create social media editorial calendars that I can share with you as well. Thanks, Diana. And I want to open it up too for those that are participating online. Please feel free. You can always take yourself off mute if you want to share what you're doing. If there's any practice tool resource that you want to share with us, please feel free, or you can add it in the chat box and Julie will let us know when it's there. So next, want to share Facebook. And this first brings me back to Julie's cocktail party. Facebook really is kind of this space where there's a lot of engaging with friends, family, the active networking with groups, finding those that are in your group that care about different things and sharing things that can easily be shared with others. I think aiming for posts that have 40 to 50 characters as opposed to longer posts are optimal in terms of the algorithm favoring those as opposed to longer posts. One thing to think about across tools is how are people actually consuming in terms of what device are they using for this content. Are they in their office at a desktop, or are they on a device like a phone or a tablet? And increasingly we see that there's a lot more being consumed on mobile and at different times. So it could be while folks are in line, while they're waiting to get on BART, while they're taking a quick break, walking somewhere from one meeting to the next. So it's important to be cognizant of where, not only who your audience is, but how are they accessing the information in terms of when and on what device. And I bring up the mobile in terms of Facebook and some other, there's a lot of scrolling going on, right? And they say our attention span now is about that, less than that of a goldfish in terms of 7 seconds. And a lot of times take a look at your own behavior. When you are looking at something online, on your phone, how long does it take for you to determine you want to spend more time there? I see you shaking. What's your name? Amy. So I see you nodding there. What does that mean? So how long does it take you to decide?
I don't know the exact number, but I do notice like on Instagram some of the videos they go on. So I should leave them like, how much longer is this video?
Right.
I'm used to like faster videos on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know the length.
And Jesus, you've said you've used Facebook. Do you find if you're scrolling, what are you looking for?
Usually videos they captivate my attention a lot more,
Mm-hmm.
or any infographic. If it's just some written material without an image, then I tend to overlook.
Great. That's a good point, which is pretty common across platforms, is that content shared with images has higher, double, in some cases, engagement than posts that are not accompanied by an image. And when you say captivating video, what does that mean to you?
It has to be a video that the first image is in like a teaser image for me to push play. But
Mm-hmm.
it also has to be a short video, so it has to show the amount of seconds. If it's less than a minute, then I will take the time to watch that video because I know that it'll provide me the information I need in that short amount of time. If it's longer and I want to see it, I need to save it for later, but I don't always get it.
Right, right.
I don't know,
Excellent.
I won't watch a video on social media at all because I'm not really engaging with social media at home. I'm on the bus or on my
Mm-hmm.
lunch break, and to watch a video requires putting on headphones. So
Right, right.
It's one thing to add. There's some videos that have the caption.
Yeah, they have the
Exactly.
and that makes it easier.
Yeah, which I was going to say that, you see here a best practice that video does really well. The algorithm prioritizes things like video. And what you'll see folks doing to accommodate different factors. You might be like Julie and you're on BART and I'll watch it, but I don't have my headphones. How am I going to see this? You might be Jesus, who, yes, I will watch it, but oh my gosh, 2 minutes, no way. Or there's you see the video, but the image or the thumbnail for it doesn't really mean anything to you. So I think that's where you see folks using a captivating thumbnail to even before the video starts playing, or in some sense when videos are auto playing, when you're scrolling, you'll see that oftentimes they're brief videos and they're using text overlay to tell the story and share what the video content is, as opposed to you having to listen to it. So there are ways that folks are able to take into context the reality in which we all live and we're consuming this content. So those are important things to think about. And Diane, you had your hand?
Yeah, I was just wondering, so I have only like sparingly used the in-app tools for making videos, and like, I'm wondering if you know much about like, you know, the general I'll use it like if I'm uploading some photos from an event, I might have to make a video of that, but aren't there other videos on Facebook?
I don't know, but I could find out for you. Yeah.
I just thought if you know off the top of your head, and I wondered if those played into the algorithm of those getting prioritized.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Yeah. I will find out. Let's put that in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And Liza?
Back to Twitter and just ask a very basic question.
Yes.
What happens when you ask someone?
So,
It shows up in their notifications.
yeah, exactly. So it shows up in their notifications. The nice thing about that, I mean, it says a couple things, right? It's if you're delivering relevant content and you are, you know, you're adding somebody that's in the sector, it's a nice way to say, hey, I want you to be part of this conversation. This is valuable to you, hopefully, and you might want to share it, right? There's a bad practice. Sometimes people at folks and it's not relevant at all. So you wouldn't want to do that. But for instance, say I'm sharing on the SafeTrack Twitter account our story that we did with Walk Bike Berkeley, and I at Walk Bike Berk. It's a nice way, it'll show up in your notifications. So you say, hey, SafeTrack is sharing our story. This is cool. And you can reply to it. You can retweet it. So it's a way in which to gather folks into the conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I
Okay.
just wasn't sure what happened then. And you can't see, you can't necessarily search for posts in which other people have been added, right? Like you can search for hashtags, and then
Yeah.
but if you are actually looking at a feed, you see there's tweets and replies, but you don't see conversations.
Right. You can't see all of it. It's a little overwhelming, but it's a good place to start.
Yeah,
Look on that
to our social
notifications there.
media, so,
No worries. And also, as we see here, when we get back to, as we said at the beginning, measuring your results, most tools have native to the platform analytics or ways to measure results. So Facebook has their own insights page that is helpful for you to track results, and I think you can track by different measurements. And Twitter also has analytics. I'm sure LinkedIn also does, native to LinkedIn. There are other third-party tools that you can use, but I think you can start with those that are native to the app that you're using. And as you'll see here, similar to Twitter, thinking about time of day and frequency of posting, each will have its own type of best practice. I don't think that, Twitter, you want to be consistent, right? Facebook, I don't think that, as you say, not over 5 times a day, that would be a high bar to reach. But that's getting to, you don't want to be spamming people, right? And as they're scrolling through and seeing too much content, You want to be able to deliver value, and I think that's a time sink in itself to try to aim for that. And it's not a best practice. Oops, let's go back here. So the next that we have here is Instagram, and I think a few folks are using Instagram. Instagram's a very visual medium, great for the active discovery, experience, tapping into trends that are happening. In terms of here at School of Public Health and others, I've seen folks using Instagram for courses, for students to share their work, to engage in conversations and what's happening in the course. I think, you know, this 80-20 rule, you might say, for this third bullet point about only 20% promotional is a good way of thinking about not just sharing your own content all the time or promotional items, but sharing content from elsewhere is also a good thing of being generous, and also how you might tell your story. You could use hashtags also on Instagram. You know, identify those that are relevant to your industry and what others are using within your sector. Don't want to use too many of them. It's good to see if your posts are getting engagement and reply to any comments in an authentic, positive way. And I think similar to some of the other platforms, getting back to that experimentation and practicing, is seeing when folks are on the platform, they might be checking the feed outside of our work times when we're able to post. So it might be where you can think about, are there other times when folks are here when I should be posting that I can reach them? And Instagram also has an insights for you to measure your results. Anybody else have something they want to share that they use for Instagram that works for them? No? Okay. YouTube, I think, is a great place to be if you're able to. You know, creating videos can feel quite burdensome. However, as I mentioned before, there are more tools now, kind of democratizing the act of being able to create a video and share it, and that there are tools that you can use to both capture the video and to edit and share it. And so I'll share some of those links at the end. But for video, because it still is a time investment, get back to your being intentional and think about, is this content the best way to share it? Is video the best way, or should it be some other way, right? Who are you making the video for? Why do you want people to share it? Would they share it? It sounds like, you know, Jesus mentioned something that's pretty relevant in terms of briefer videos have more engagement oftentimes, but thinking about also, if it's a longer video, maybe that's purposeful. That's because you are going to share it for this audience, and having a longer time in this setting is right. Maybe it's at a fundraiser or at a training, right? So it's being intentional. You want to keep your messages simple, accessible, and in terms of that production value, I think some of the core principles: good sound, good lighting, a steady shot, dimensions, and the file requirements for each platform. I'm sure that we've seen some videos that have the black bars on either side. And that's from probably oftentimes capturing a video maybe on your iPhone and holding it in portrait instead of landscape. Although now they make apps that you can download to your phone that no matter how you hold your phone, it'll put the video into landscape for you. But it's still important to think about that. As I said, there's free editing programs. We see a best practice that Jesus already mentioned, that a lot of times folks are watching without sound, so considering adding subtitles and descriptive text. Short seems to be increasingly because of our dwindling attention span. There's that, but there's also the fact that I think in terms of assets, our time and our attention is right up there, right? So there are a lot of those in the environment that are trying to capture our attention. So that's why we're probably looking and scanning and making judgment calls on what we want to consume so quickly. So keep that in mind. And then lastly, LinkedIn is the last tool that I was just going to share some best practices. LinkedIn, several of you are using, show of hands. Yeah, and I think that it's a great place for your organization to be, at least to have a presence. And it's a business-oriented social platform. It's a great place to position your organization as an industry leader or an influencer, a credible voice that has quality content to share. You'll want to, I think even if you don't intend to share a lot of content, it's good to have a presence on LinkedIn. Is that an earthquake? Sorry, for those that are online, we just felt a little bit of a rumble, and we were wondering if that was a Berkeley earthquake.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Swaying and tiles aren't falling.
We're good. Okay, we are not dropping, covering air. We're all good. Okay, so similar to the other platforms, you do want to regularly post, so you have a presence there. There's times of day that seem to be when folks are on and consuming and active. That looks like early morning, lunch, or early evening. Thinking about what type of content shares, shorter copy as opposed to longer format. If it's longer, how can you make it easier to consume using formatting things like bullets in order to make, when somebody's coming in and they see the content, is this valuable to me? They're making that judgment call. Organizing the content for them to easily make that judgment call makes sense. You can share interesting information, whether that's stats, key points, quotes, instead of dense academic content. You can drive them to the dense academic content, and I think similar to what Diana was bringing up before. You can either post video directly or to a video link. I know that LinkedIn has some tools that can help you target the right audience, as well as a content suggestion tool. I think you can filter and refine on LinkedIn to show what's resonating with a specific target audience. They have a tool for that. You can also use hashtags here. And similar to Twitter, I think when your brand is mentioned here, you will be notified. So that's another way, like Liza brought up the @ mentioning on Twitter. How do you know? LinkedIn does the same thing, and we'll let you know. Anybody else want to share anything that they're using with LinkedIn?
We have used it to post advertising for postdoc positions
Mm-hmm.
and our events, but I don't think we're making full use of it. And I think what I found challenging is just how to use it effectively, to because I don't know, we're not an opinion-based organization. It's like we have research, and again, how do you make that intriguing and interesting?
Right.
Who's the target? I would say mostly our target would be potential students. And are they on LinkedIn? That's another question.
Yeah. I think that's where doing the listening will help, seeing if there's any other units on campus that are using it well, and looking at some tutorials to get the kind of nuts and bolts best practices. And I know for a lot of units it is underutilized. I know at Safe Trek we'd like to utilize it more than we do.
Right.
I know I can share some links there. For instance, there's a faculty member at the Institute for Transportation Studies and a co-lead of the Innovative Mobility Research Group, Professor Susan Shaheen. I know her personal LinkedIn is very robust.
Okay.
And she does a lot of sharing of content on LinkedIn, and she does a compendium of the latest mobility news and insights that are happening weekly. And she shares that in her network, and she has a pretty robust following on Twitter, and that's a way that she's using as a faculty member and expert leader in that sector on LinkedIn. So I can share that, and I'm sure there's others that we don't know about but could find out through listening.
Right.
Because, yeah, that's a...
Yeah. That's a great idea. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing on Twitter, but on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm connected with some of the faculty, but I don't think all of our faculty are even a member of our LinkedIn group. So I don't know if they necessarily do more
Right.
into our LinkedIn group, and we haven't really done that. I mean, our LinkedIn group is fairly small.
Okay.
I mean, I know we're running out of time, so I don't want to, get bogged down in things that might not even be relevant to this discussion. I only started using LinkedIn on a personal level because I was at a previous organization where the culture of the organization was very much building your brand and networking, and that when everyone had their LinkedIn page, and I created my own LinkedIn page, which, it's important to include that on applications now because it's sort of expected. But otherwise, I don't have LinkedIn on my phone. I don't use the app. Like, I have no interest in LinkedIn because I'm not in a networking stage of life. The thing that I found in the news feeds in LinkedIn was, just as there's sort of that complaint about Facebook that it's a very superficial way to interact with people, I felt that a lot of the articles that industries were putting out, the industries that I followed, were very much lip service to things that the companies weren't necessarily doing. It's like, here's how to value your female employees more, things like that. That felt very superficial and very like, we're putting this out there for our image, but didn't have any more depth than that.
Yeah, that feels like getting back to, like any conversation being had in a large room or a much larger room, there's ones that are quality and there's ones that are not, and they're more promotional or they're kind of dubious, as you say. So I think there are those that are delivering value and content and making good connections through that, and you can see it, right? So I think it's aiming, if you do intend to use it, that you're clear on that's what you're choosing to use it for. And I think it will be clear and evident to those that discover you and want to connect with you. So
I'll just say, from someone who engages with a lot of students who are in a networking stage in their life, not necessarily any sort of institutional LinkedIn account, but me just continuing to reach out to my own professional network, and then having my students connect with me on LinkedIn, then gives them a passageway to network with the people's lives. So and in a way that doesn't involve me trying to rack my brain about who might be good for them to connect with. They can come to me and say, oh, I see you're connected with so-and-so at Time Network Foundation, could you introduce me to them? So I'm like a database. My LinkedIn profile is like a database that they can use to their network.
So how do students know that that's the appropriate way to use LinkedIn?
Well, I tell them.
Okay.
I mean, I tell them, I think, I would hope that they.
I don't know, because I don't know that would have been intuitive to me, but I'm not necessarily the right generation for that. But
something that just says, these students might feel sheepish about it, but you can also just initiate the conversation and say, I have a large professional network. I've been doing that for a long time. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I can and I do actively try to connect with people on LinkedIn who I might not necessarily ever work with in the future, but who I know that my students are in that.
Oh, okay. That's great.
Great. And I know we're over time.
Thank you.
And I just want to say thank you for having me here and consider it an ongoing conversation together. I'll share some resources. And as you see from our conversation together, there's a lot of expertise and inspiration already in the room and in the virtual space. Thank you to all who joined us virtually. Feel free to tap into that and continue that peer-to-peer inspiration and sharing. So thank you.